Noah Richler, journalist, author, and podcaster. Welcome to the program.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Fear and loathing on the campaign trail. Fear and loathing, of course, a very well-known expression.
Yes.
Why did you choose that as the title?
Well, it's a homage to Hunter S. Thompson, of course, who was such a good and original political writer and who followed what I think his book came out about 44 years ago. But he used the title more than once himself, and so I felt that it was a kind of shortcut and would tell people immediately something of the tone of the book. You'll be disappointed if you're looking for great druggy hazes. It's not that. And I'm a little disappointed you didn't say, hang on, are you comparing yourself to Robert Redford, the candidate? But no, so it's there's a little tribute being paid, and it's acknowledged inside with an epigraph from Hunter Thompson as well.
Now, you are a creative person, and politics and creativity don't necessarily go hand in hand. Why did you choose to enter the fray, as it were?
Well, I was basically just fed up, as so many people were, and with Harper and the kind of perversion of Canadian government in the last 4 years of the Conservative regime. So I think my wife knew that I'd been mulling it for a while, and I think of my books as political, even when they're about things like Canada through its storytellers. As my first book, This Is My Country, What's Yours, was. I think of them as political, but also felt it was time to participate, throw my hat in the ring. And I was very interested that for my last book, which is a book about how we talked ourselves into and out of Afghanistan, how people were afraid to speak up. So I imagined that just putting yourself forward and saying, it's time for change, and furthermore, I believe the change might actually be the third party, the NDP, was, I think, worthwhile, and it felt like I was elevating the argument, and I hoped, doing that.
In spite of your connection with political subjects, I get the impression from reading the book that you entered this and were surprised at how it actually runs.
Sure. No, I was a real innocent. I think kids in high school who study these things knew more than I did, but that innocence served me well. There's a certain grassroots tradition in the NDP as it is. I was also running in a campaign where little was expected of me. And so where there is less, there's an opportunity for that creativity you were talking about. And it was urgent for me because I was joining the game very late. I didn't have time to knock on every door in the riding. And so I needed to reach people some other way. And so the social media campaign that I always knew was going to be a part of my effort was all the more vital. And almost by chance, I ran into this fantastic videographer who helped me out with it, a guy called Nick Denboer, whom it turned out did a lot of stuff for Conan O'Brien and then later for Vice magazine. And he was able, for instance, to insert me into probably what was the most popular video of any of the parties, in which Justin Trudeau, now the Prime Minister, is standing unable to get anywhere on an escalator. And what we did in our video, we made several of them. Some were quite straightforward. Others used humor to make a point and to get people that might not have been interested in an NDP message to read it. We inserted me into those frames. So I pass Justin Trudeau on the escalator, baffled that this man is unable to get to the top, and use that as a way of making the case for the NDP. And that irritated the Liberals so much that newspapers across the land were fed scurrilous Facebook and Twitter posts that I'd written. And
in the end, you were obliged, for better or worse, to withdraw it, right?
I did withdraw the second video. There was another one that we were democratic in our targets. So there was one that took on Justin Trudeau, another that took on Harper, and used footage from the national interview that Peter Mansbridge had done with Stephen Harper in front of the buildings of Parliament. And it's actually remarkably clever, and because what happens is that this figure appears out of the lawn, you don't see who it is, and a hand comes over and removes the Canada lapel pin from Harper's suit, and then gives his seat an almighty kick and sends him flying out of the picture. And then it turns out to be me, and I sit down and I explain to Peter Mansbridge why, in fact, the NDP is the party of change. And we had good legal grounds for doing this, but by the time the CBC, which is, I suppose, a credible initiative on their part, sent a letter threatening legal action to take it down, we had a case. There was no case that the CBC had, but the NDP did actually remove it. And I put that account in the book, not to grandstand in any way, but because to me it was a symptom of a campaign that was going awry, where the leaders were losing confidence and they were just so cowed at that point that they gave in.
At one point in the book, you mentioned, and I've heard this regarding other campaigns and people who enter for the first time, that there are no guidelines. There's no book saying, this is the way it works. It's like you're pretty much, as a new candidate, left on your own device.
Absolutely. That really did surprise me. I thought, I'd get this fat book telling me whom to hire and what kind of qualities I should be looking for these people in these positions and how much money to raise and what I was expected to do in week 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. None of that. And I still wonder why that's so. Is that because the spin doctors, these fantastically undemocratic people that stand behind every party's effort to get in government, people who regard it as their job, like Kevin Spacey in the House of Cards or Alistair Campbell in Britain, to sort of manipulate public and make the public believe that they want a certain outcome. Maybe these people feel that they don't want to put any of their secrets down. Maybe by just telling you what to look for, they're somehow handing information to another party. That's the mindset, that I learned about towards the end. I mean, in the beginning, my campaign was carried by this fantastic tide of extraordinary goodwill of volunteers giving their time and money, and then you kind of slam up against the wall of the party operatives. That's the less inspiring part of politics.
Well, Noah Richler, one of the things that I also found interesting was a comment made to you fairly early on saying, politics is not about ideas, it's about winning.
Yes, that was a comment made by one of your confrères, by a CBC political reporter, a really decent guy, James Cudmore, who was in Ottawa for a time, and who was positively distressed at the idea that his friend might run. And he gave, he sent a nice note, gave good advice, but I did it anyway. But he was saying, they're not going to be interested in your ideas. And he was right. No, I had this fantasy that somebody would call from, Ottawa saying, no, we got a little fix here in the cultural realm or in foreign policy. What do you think? Of course, that was never going to happen. It's too intense. Everybody's in a cocoon during a campaign.
Well, isn't it also a case where the leaders aren't, of any party, not just the NDP, but any party, really aren't all that interested in the little guys or little people in the party, the backbenchers or the backbenchers, just, be quiet kind of thing.
Yeah, and someone else actually tried to raise the horror of the backbench to me, and I sort of play with that. There are these little fantasy sequences in the book that aren't actually quite true, in which I imagine myself to be a politician in positions of less and less power. But they don't have, and I'm actually sympathetic. I mean, in a way, running a campaign from the national point of view is a potentially enormous human resources problem. And I'm sure you go to work every day thinking, please save me from some further embarrassing action by, the candidate in Lethbridge or wherever, and when it came my turn to be the potentially embarrassing thing, they were actually they were quite supportive, but they did not, I said to them, look, okay, at that point the Facebook and Twitter posts being used against me. I said, look, I've got a column here, I've written it, we can publish it. It says, I'm sorry, I'm not saying sorry, let's move it on. And that was actually fairly prescient. I think some other political candidate will do that, because what we've learned from Trump in America is that the people don't really listen to all these efforts by media, especially to embarrass candidates. They're actually put off by that, those ordinary rites of passage.
Well, Noah Richler, what did you learn about politics? I mean, eventually you did not win your seat in politics, as was more or less expected. Yeah. What did you learn about politics?
I learned that you have to believe you can win, that it's not even irrational to believe you can win. You're leading all these people. I spoke of the extraordinary tide of goodwill of volunteers. How can you do that if you think you're going to lose? Then you're almost acting in bad faith or lying. I learned that as the candidate, you're not the boss. You're part of this incredible enterprise. And that brings a smile to my face even now, because I was surrounded by people who knew more than me. And I suppose I learned that it works and it's a good thing. The book really helped me sort out these conflicted emotions, and I felt preposterously disappointed after I lost. I took it far too personally, and I knew it was silly to do so, but that's how it felt. But the book made me understand what a privilege it is to have a democracy and what good work people do. It's one of the best things I did in my life.
So you're not cynical at all about some of the things that came across?
No. And
for example, you have to hate your opponent, and you have to. It's not about ideas. It's winning.
I was giving. Yeah. No, and I'm never going to be that fella. And perhaps I was saved from something by losing, though I think I would have probably made a virtue of it had I won too. But I don't. I think that we evolve constantly, and we'll learn how to deal with the, as I say, pseudo House of Cards spin doctors that think they know best, and will, it's a constantly evolving craft. I'd say more than art or science. And the bottom line is it's driven by people volunteering and by people willing to listen to you at the door. Excuse me.
What about the message from the inside as opposed to the message the public gets on the outside?
What do you mean by that?
Well, the experience of being on the inside and what people see on the outside in terms of...
Well, I was actually stunned when I set about writing this book, and I did not mean to write a book. I didn't enter politics to do this. In fact, I told the first person who asked me if I could write a book that there was no way I could do it. I'd only been in the game for 5 months. And then it came very easily, and it was enormous fun to write this book. And what it is a kind of a narrative journey, almost a novel-like narrative journey of what it means to be a candidate. And there was great material for that. But it's also an exercise in political transparency. I was stunned that there was no account of a political campaign from the ground. The only memoirs we have are by people who are in power or vying for power. I'm not that. I lost. I was one of the 1,454 people that did not win last year. But what you have here is a completely true, documented, and I hope entertaining account that offers up example of that transparency that politicians always say they're after but rarely enact.
What about yourself, Noah Richler? What did you learn about yourself before and after this?
Well, it may not sound like this is true, but I learned to write more simply. I learned to speak in shorter sentences and communicate a little bit better. I think it taught the people that love me the most around me that, in fact, I'm okay. They were very worried about how I'd be at the door. Would I be able to engage the public? That was not an issue for me and provides me some great memories. And probably that I'm, on the one hand, a fellow that still believes he has ideas to contribute to the political sphere, but on the other, probably rightfully back in the old job.
Noah Richler, thank you very much for this, and congratulations on an interesting book and
Thank you.
entertaining as well.
Great. Thank you, Mark.